Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ivonne Baldelli. Ivonne Baldelli, born Fold, was born on June 30, 1969, in a small town in sunny Southern California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold and grew up with her brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she developed a particularly close relationship from an early age. When Ivonne was 13, her mother passed away after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried Leland F.A., and the grown children developed a wonderful relationship with their stepmother, who was a kind and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Ivonne received a solid education and explored many career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be on her side when it came to her personal life. She had been married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. Additionally, a surgery she underwent as a young woman, followed by complications, left Ivonne unable to have children. After her divorce from her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Ivonne lived alone in her small apartment with her dog, whom she affectionately called Baby. She kept in regular contact with her father and sister, calling them almost every day and trying to see her family at least once a month. In 2009, as Ivonne was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At the time, he was legally married and had a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open about his extramarital affair and shared with Ivonne that he was unhappy in his marriage, claiming that he had not filed for divorce only because he did not want to hurt his child. Ivonne fell in love with this handsome, tanned, healthy man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself and knowing how difficult it is to leave such a relationship, she did not push her partner, believing that the presence of a child was the main obstacle. However, Brian was not as straightforward and sincere as he seemed. From a young age, his attractive appearance made him very popular with the opposite sex. He was used to juggling several relationships at once and skillfully deceived the women who fell in love with him, promising each of them marriage, a family, and eternal love. It was soon discovered that the married Brian had not only met Ivonne but had also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a gorgeous blonde with many connections. She was a White House analyst. When Ivonne learned about another rival, she decided to tackle the situation directly and fight for the man she loved. Summoning her courage, she contacted Brian's wife to reveal that he was cheating on her with two women. This revelation caused a heated debate, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Ivonne, though it's possible she influenced his choice. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with Ivonne. At that time, he was still in the Marines but had been thinking about leaving his military career. The couple appeared genuinely happy, but Ivonne's family remained skeptical of Brian, questioning the sincerity of his feelings. In the summer of 2011, Brian expressed his desire to make significant changes in his life. He wanted to leave the military, move away from the busy city, and settle on a tropical island. Ivonne felt the same way. She supported him completely and was ready to go wherever he chose. She believed he was the most important person in her life and loved him deeply. By September of that year, they had made their decision. The couple would move to Panama and live on the small island of Carino, which they considered a true paradise. Ivonne told her family about her plans just before leaving, so they didn't have a chance to convince her to change her mind. She sold her apartment, quit her job, and began packing for the trip. Ivonne packed only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, aiming to start a small boutique where she could create and sell custom outfits for tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Ivonne, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a few days in the capital before taking a ferry to Carino Island, where they rented a house right by the ocean. The climate was hot and humid, with consistent temperatures year-round, which attracted many tourists, especially those interested in diving and surfing. The island was only 1 square kilometer in size, allowing visitors to walk around it in about an hour. Most of the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior consisted of dense jungle and swampy areas filled with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it dangerous to explore. Brian, a talented guitar player since he was young, brought his guitar hoping to start a musical career by performing in local entertainment venues on the island. Within a week of moving, he had contacted with several local bar owners, and one of them offered him a job. He performed in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his audience often bought him drinks, which led him to drink heavily almost every day. Yvonne's business was growing very slowly, facing poor sales and making little profit. Nevertheless, she remained determined. She took a job at one of the bars and adopted a second dog she found on the island. Yvonne communicated with her sister, Michelle, almost every day, sharing updates, but her messages became shorter and more gloomy, causing concern for her family. The couple initially enjoyed their first few months on the island, feeling like they were in paradise. Yvonne dreamed that Brian would propose and they would have a romantic wedding by the ocean. However, as time went on, Brian didn't seem eager to get married, and their relationship began to decline. By early December, Michelle noticed that Yvonne had stopped messaging her, which made her worry. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle to ask when he could come by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in her family garage before going to Panama. This call surprised Michelle because it meant that Brian was back in the US and wanted to pick up his car. She wondered where Yvonne was and why she hadn't returned or even contacted her. Brian said he had detailed everything in an email sent a few days ago. He also said that his ex-girlfriend had supposedly messaged Yvonne about the situation. Michelle looked at her messages but found nothing, so she checked her email. She discovered 2 unread messages, one from her younger sister and another from him. In his messages, Brian stated that Yvonne had left him, running away to Costa Rica with a new lover. Another message, purportedly from Yvonne, claimed that she had left Brian after discovering his affair and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. The message ended with her stating that she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine, with whom he had been involved for a long time and who was pregnant with his child when he and Yvonne flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed reasonable, especially since Yvonne was unable to have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else would have been extremely distressing for her. However, Yvonne was not known for acting impulsively, and she would certainly have called her younger sister to discuss such a major change in her life. Furthermore, the tone of the message purportedly from Yvonne was somewhat strange and unlike her previous communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle attempted to determine her younger sister's current whereabouts, she was unable to obtain any concrete information. Calls went unanswered, and incoming messages were brief and discreet, stating things like, "I'm fine, I need time," and "I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian file a missing persons report. Brian appeared concerned but insisted that it was unnecessary, asserting that Yvonne was fine, capable of taking care of herself, and would decide when to return home. Although Brian was reluctant to even discuss the matter and hurriedly left after getting the car, a message from Yvonne's phone soon arrived, stating that she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message relieved Michelle, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping that Yvonne would return as stated in the message. By mid-January, not only had Yvonne not returned home, but she had also not called once during that time, and her messages had stopped altogether. Furthermore, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had married Christine just before New Year's, which seemed very strange since he had broken up with his ex-girlfriend just weeks before the celebration. Worried, Michelle eventually went to the police department and reported her younger sister missing, suspecting that Ivonne had not gone to Costa Rica. An official investigation sent to Panama, the results showed that Ivonne had not left the country. Michelle then asked her cousin, a programmer, to help track down the IP address from which Ivonne had sent the messages, determining their true origin. It turned out that the emails purportedly sent by Ivonne from Costa Rica in December were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was staying. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation became increasingly alarming, Michelle rushed to inform the police of her discovery. Michelle contacted the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her younger sister in Panama and then continued to send text messages and emails from her phone, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue to gather evidence of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Ivonne. He promised Christine that he would return soon, that they would marry, and that they would raise their daughter together. Furthermore, Christine did not know that Brian had come to the island with Ivonne, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's investigation began 2 months after Yvonne's disappearance, when her sister and niece flew to Panama themselves. There, they sought the help of Don Winter, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator specializing in finding missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Yvonne's disappearance and Brian's version of events. After listening to them, Don immediately expressed concern that the possibility of Yvonne being alive was very low. With extensive experience in such investigations and leveraging her connections, Don decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was held with the participation of Yvonne's family members. Later, Yvonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other close relatives and friends traveled to Panama to join the search and assist in the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Carino, searched thoroughly, but found no trace of Yvonne. Their search efforts were hampered by dense bushes and swamps filled with wild animals. In addition, the family asked the islanders how well they knew Brian and Yvonne and what they could tell them. It turned out that the couple had been drinking heavily recently and often argued loudly, disregarding those around them. They were seen at the bar almost every day, drinking and arguing violently. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Yvonne's face and body. She hardly ever took off her sunglasses, apparently to hide the bruises under her eyes. The couple's landlord confirmed that neighbors frequently complained about noise, screaming, and swearing coming from their residence. At the same time, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to search for any potential evidence or remains of her. Unfortunately, these searches also yielded no results. Brian was initially the prime suspect in the case, but there was no concrete evidence to charge him. He denied any involvement, repeatedly telling the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It was not until September 21, 2012, that Brian was questioned and his home searched. At the time, his wife, Christine, was at work while Brian, unemployed, stayed home with the children and immersed in his beloved game of golf. Initially, he appeared confident, recalling that Yvonne had left him after discovering his child with another woman. However, he became visibly concerned, and the police mentioned that the last messages sent under Yvonne's name came from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his desk. The confiscated laptop turned out to be Yvonne's, with messages sent from it after she had supposedly fled. A photo of Yvonne with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, as well as a screenshot of a conversation from November in which Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and the shared custody of their daughter, which is probably how Yvonne learned about them. Furthermore, the laptop search history from November 26, 2011, contained queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were important but circumstantial, as no body or mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had sent messages impersonating Yvonne did not conclusively prove his guilt. Don soon discovered that before leaving Panama, Brian had sold a machete he owned. In an online chat with a potential buyer, he joked that he had only used the weapon once, to finish off a stripper. The prank was so creepy that authorities tracked down the machete's new owner and confiscated the blade for testing, which initially yielded no reliable results. The long-awaited arrest came when police overlooked another crucial detail: Yvonne's bank card. Brian had used the card after she disappeared to add credibility to his story. Before returning to the United States, he decided to take a trip to Costa Rica and used her card multiple times, creating the illusion that she had actually fled to that country. He paid for his ticket in cash and withdrew money from various locations in San Jose, emptying the card before discarding it. Brian had no idea, however, that he had been caught on surveillance cameras at ATMs. In July 2013, a year and a half after Yvonne disappeared, her relatives, along with evidence collected by the police, FBI, and Don Winter, succeeded in getting Brian arrested. He was initially charged with making false statements and obstructing the investigation due to a lack of stronger evidence at that time. At that point, Brian had recently become a father for the second time, as Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to have an honest conversation with Brian, hoping he would confess to the crime and reveal where the body was, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. His lawyer argued that there was no body and no direct evidence linking Brian to Yvonne's disappearance. 2 months after Brian's arrest, investigators made a shocking discovery in the swamp that significantly advanced the case. On Canaro Island, a worker exploring a shortcut accidentally stumbled upon a partially submerged army backpack in the murky underbrush. Out of curiosity, he opened the bag and was horrified to find a human skull inside. He promptly reported the discovery to the police, who arrived to collect the backpack for further examination. Inside, they found dismembered human remains along with the bodies of 2 small dogs. The remains had been cut into pieces, placed in the bag, and hidden in a spot where they were unlikely to be discovered. DNA tests confirmed that the human remains were those of Yvonne, though some body parts were missing. Pathologists revealed that she had suffered severe trauma prior to her death, including a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The presence of the dogs suggested a calculated effort to support the narrative, as it seemed unlikely that Yvonne would abandon her beloved pets, implying that they were also killed and buried alongside her. The chop marks on the victim's bones matched the blade of a machete, confirming that the body had been dismembered with this one. Each machete blade has a unique pattern, similar to a fingerprint. As a result of this evidence, Brian was officially charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. In early 2014, Michelle was diagnosed with advanced aggressive cancer. She had been so focused on investigating her younger sister's case that she neglected her own health and put off doctor visits. After 6 months of intensive treatment that didn't work, she chose to spend her remaining time fighting for justice for her sister. In September 2014, doctors informed Michelle that she had only a few weeks to live. Despite her illness, she vowed to continue advocating for her sister until her last moments. She decided to testify in front of Brian, sharing everything she knew and providing all correspondence with Yvonne to the court. She carefully recounted Brian's actions following her sister's disappearance, but then fainted from exhaustion. Michelle died 3 days later. The prosecution contended that on the night of November 26, after another argument with Yvonne over Brian's messages to Christine, Brian, fueled by anger and alcohol, attacked Yvonne and fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub with a machete, using the same weapon to kill Yvonne's dogs, and placed their remains in his military backpack. The limbs that couldn't fit in the bag were discarded in the ocean, thrown off a rocky cliff early in the morning, along with a blood-stained mattress. Brian then carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the following weeks, he stayed in the same coastal house, carefully removing any traces of the crime. He told the locals a convincing story about his girlfriend leaving him for another man, which led them to sympathize with him. He even found a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until he left for the U.S. During the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of dishonesty and being cruel. With strong evidence against him, Brian admitted his guilt but argued it was in self-defense, claiming that Ivonne had attacked him first with a knife, which he then used to defend himself. He stated that everything that happened afterward was due to shock, insisting he didn't remember dismembering her body or handling the dogs. However, his internet searches and efforts to destroy evidence showed that he was fully aware of his actions and tried to create a false narrative to explain Yvonne's disappearance. In the spring of 2016, Brian was convicted of manslaughter and received a 26-year prison sentence, with the chance for parole in 2035. His prior service in the Marines was taken into account during sentencing, which helped him avoid a life sentence. Additionally, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, expressed her belief in his innocence and her unwavering support for him. The tragic case of Ivonne Baldelli highlights not only the devastating impact of domestic violence and deceit but also the tireless pursuit of justice by her family. Despite the initial fog of lies and misdirection, the truth ultimately emerged, revealing a chilling narrative of betrayal and loss. Yvonne's story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of vigilance and support for those in perilous situations, urging us to seek justice for victims and ensure that their voices are never silenced. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born on June 12, 1975, in Portland. Her family soon moved to Federal Way, a suburb near Seattle. Sarah had two siblings and shared a special bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, she loved music and ballet. She was dedicated to her studies, aiming to get into a good university. Her academic success allowed her to visit New Zealand twice through a school program. She later became a cheerleader at her high school and had many friends. Sarah was admired for her kindness and readiness to support those in need. On the morning of Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team for an event. They planned to gather at the school, where a bus would pick them up. Sarah drove her father's car to the school but arrived an hour early. She mistakenly thought the bus would arrive at 8 a.m., but it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends arrived, Sarah was nowhere to be found. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. When the bus arrived, Sarah still hadn't appeared. Her friends found this puzzling, but since they didn't have mobile phones back then, they couldn't contact her. At the same time, two 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds. They noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't think much of it and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they came across a horrifying sight, a young woman lying unresponsive on the ground. They feared she might be dead. The children ran home to inform their parents. One of the parents returned to the scene with them, while the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child reported seeing a car similar to a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area. Since he lived close to the school, his father decided to look for that car. He briefly spotted a similar car but quickly lost it and couldn't find it again. Meanwhile, the other child's parents went to the school and saw that the young woman on the ground was likely dead. They immediately rushed into the school to call the police. When the officers arrived, they confirmed that the young woman had indeed passed away and identified her as Sarah. Based on the marks on her neck, they concluded she had been strangled. Some of her belongings, such as her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found near her body. Oddly, her purse and car keys were found in the school parking lot, suggesting that her attacker may have assaulted her near her car and then dragged her behind some trees. The body was handed over to forensic experts, and the police started their search for clues. Their first step was to interview everyone who was on the school premises and nearby. 2 kids who found Sarah gave a description of the man who came out from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall guy, around his 20s, with shoulder-length reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black pants. Soon, the police managed to find another witness, and this is where a surprising twist in the story unfolds. According to the man, he went for a run and noticed something unusual in the woods. He saw a girl lying near the bushes with a man standing over her. At first, the girl didn't move, and the man thought they were a couple being intimate. A few minutes later, running back the same way, he saw both of them still there. He didn't think a serious crime was happening. The man later told the police he had recently moved to the United States and wasn't familiar with typical behavior in the country. However, he was able to give a rough description of the man, which matched what the children who found the body described. Investigators spoke with many people who had been near the school but did not uncover any new leads. Meanwhile, medical experts examined Sarah's body and determined that she died from strangulation. It seems the attacker used his own socks, and they also found a severe wound on her. Experts believe the blow made her lose consciousness, matching the runner's report of seeing her lying still on the ground. In 1991, forensic experts examined Sarah's clothing and found traces of male hair on most of her clothing. However, there wasn't a DNA database available to compare these samples, so investigators could only make direct DNA comparisons with specific suspects. Detectives identified another lead in the case. Although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor confirmed there were no signs of sexual assault on her body. With this information, investigators developed a theory about what happened. Sarah arrived at the school nearly an hour early and was alone in the parking lot. It is believed her attacker saw her, waited for her to get out of her car, then hit her on the head with an object, knocking her unconscious. He then dragged her behind some trees, where her body was later found. The attacker removed some of her clothing, committed indecent acts, and then strangled her with her own socks. When one of the children who found Sarah's body mentioned a car in which the attacker supposedly escaped, detectives started looking for a Chevrolet Nova. They found such a car quickly, but the driver was just delivering donuts that morning. He gave a DNA sample, which did not match the DNA on Sarah's clothing. It seems the children just noticed the vehicle driving nearby and mistakenly believed the perpetrator was inside. None of the children could definitely recall seeing a man coming from the bushes to a car. In the following days, police officers continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but no significant progress was made. Classes resumed on Monday despite the recent tragedy. The murder had occurred just a few meters from the school, and the perpetrator was still at large with an unknown identity. The girls were scared to walk alone near the school, so boys from the sports teams decided to escort each female student to their car or bus to ensure they weren't left alone on the street. Investigators discovered there were about 70 potential witnesses at the school and nearby that morning. They interviewed each one, but no new information came to light. Using statements from the 2 children in the runner, a sketch of the attacker was made and shared with all local newspapers and TV stations. The story gained significant media attention, resulting in the police receiving hundreds of tips in the following weeks. Investigators thoroughly followed up on each tip, but none led to any breakthroughs. At one moment, they found a potential suspect who resembled the attacker's description and had a criminal history. However, this lead also proved fruitless because the suspect's DNA did not match the sample from the victim's clothing. The case remained inactive for months. The police received 4,000 tips and tried to follow up on each one, but the local police department didn't have enough resources to manage all the information. Additionally, time was against them because new cases demanded the investigators' attention every month. When Sarah's family found out that the police didn't have enough resources to handle all the tips, they decided to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a technology company and persuaded the company to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000, which was a lot of money in the 1990s. The company agreed, and the police used this computer to store all the tips in one place, process them quickly, and organize them for easy access. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, each tip went nowhere, and there was no progress in the following years. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates graduated. Before their graduation, they decided to honor her by raising a substantial amount of money to build a memorial. This memorial was a bench with Sarah's belongings cast in metal. Next to these items, there was a photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Over the years, the case was occasionally reopened, and all available evidence was re-examined, but the outcome remained unchanged. The perpetrator was still not found. During this time, the police interviewed several thousand people and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects, but all efforts were unsuccessful. In 2011, 2 decades after the murder, a detective decided to use modern technology. He learned about a company specializing in genetic genealogy. The detective reached out and asked if they could find relatives of the person whose DNA was found on the victim. The experts accepted the challenge, but they were unsuccessful. At that time, genetic genealogy was in its early stages, and the experts faced limitations in what they could do. For example, they were unable to search for both male and female relatives within the same sample. If they had a man's DNA, they could only look for connections with other men, and the same applied to women. Additionally, they encountered legal challenges due to laws that restricted using genetic data samples to identify relatives of suspects. Nonetheless, their efforts produced some interesting outcomes. The detectives contacted a research team that had been working for years on mapping the genetic lineage of the first people who arrived in the United States from Britain on the Mayflower in 1620. After analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found he was related to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracing him through this lineage was almost impossible, particularly given the challenges of those times. While the Mayflower carried just over 100 passengers, their descendants now number more than 25 million. Secondly, the detective didn't realize that he had turned Sarah's case into the first of its kind. Although his initial attempt was unsuccessful, it was the first crime to be attempted to solve with the help of genetic genealogy. The detective tried to use the available information and track down several men with the last name Fuller who lived in the area of the city at the time of Sarah's murder. He found photos of them and met with the only witnesses, a jogger and 2 men who had found the body when they were kids. Unfortunately, none of them recognized the killer in the photos. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. They contacted the company that had been analyzing the DNA sample from the assailant since 2011. By that time, DNA analysis technology had improved significantly, and the experts agreed to attempt to trace the assailant's ancestry. It took them 2 years of meticulous work using public databases to identify even distant relatives of the assailant. They then manually traced these relatives' family connections to people who lived around the time of Sarah's death. In total, they had to rule out several thousand people before finally making a breakthrough. In September 2019, investigators identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were found to be descendants of Robert Fuller through DNA evidence. Experts concluded that a DNA sample from Sarah's clothing likely belonged to one of these brothers. At the time of the murder, Edward was 33 and Patrick was 27. The older brother, Bedward, had a long history of violent crimes and had served time in prison. His DNA was already in the FBI database, so he could not have been involved in Sarah's murder. If he were the perpetrator, his DNA would have matched back in the 1990s. The younger brother, named Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested several times by the police for violent crimes, including those against minors. However, this happened before DNA samples from those criminals were added to the database. The detectives put the man under surveillance immediately. Patrick lived in a neighboring city called Wellington. The police had been following him for 2 days, and soon an opportunity arose. One day, Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke and threw a cigarette butt on the ground. An officer quickly collected it in an evidence bag and returned to his car. When Patrick stepped out to smoke again, a cloth handkerchief fell from his pocket. The officers picked it up, deciding to keep the handkerchief as a backup in case experts couldn't extract a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. The forensic experts successfully collected samples from all the items. The next day, they informed the detective that Patrick's DNA perfectly matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing from 1991. The judge quickly issued an arrest warrant for the man, and the police detained him. It took investigators 5 days to confirm his identity before they formally charged him with murder. When his background was leaked to the media, many questioned why someone with such a criminal history had not been considered a suspect for the past 28 years. At 19, Patrick Nicholas approached a young woman, got into her car, and attempted to assault her. The victim managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming a long distance to reach safety. He has a criminal record. Patrick served a 4-year prison sentence before being released. In 1994, he was arrested again for attempting to assault a minor. Although he was detained, his DNA was not entered into any database. This was because the charge at the time was not considered serious enough to warrant DNA collection, and the police did not encounter his name for 30 years. Additionally, he was not mentioned in any of the 4,000 leads generated over the years. Genetic genealogy experts couldn't link him to Robert Fuller because Patrick's biological lineage had been adopted, and he grew up with a different surname. One of the men who found Sarah's body as a child in 1991 immediately recognized Patrick as the killer. He confessed that the event had profoundly impacted him, especially since he was only 12 years old when they found the body and the killer had seen him. For years, he lived in fear that the murderer might come after him. It wasn't until Patrick was arrested that he finally felt safe. Patrick's trial started in 2023. He claimed he was innocent, and his lawyer tried to dispute the main evidence, which was DNA. The lawyer argued that finding Patrick's DNA on the victim's clothing didn't prove his guilt, but this argument was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this challenge baseless. In the end, Patrick was convicted of first-degree murder without premeditation. On May 25, he received a sentence of 45 years and 8 months in prison, making it almost impossible for him to be released. During the sentencing, Patrick showed no emotion, unlike Sarah's family. Her family spoke before the judge, expressing gratitude to everyone involved in the trial and the investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jaime, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shaina. Unfortunately, shortly after Shaina was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shaina was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jaime and Sean, were able to escape, but Shaina, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shaina, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shaina in the fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jaime and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tayan's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee, or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jaime Han. Jaime Han was born on October 25, 1983, in Orangeburg, South Carolina. She was a compassionate person who always put the needs of others first. She was known for her kindness and her ability to make people happy. Despite her parents' divorce and remarriage, but she grew up with her 2 brothers, Brett and Justin, and sister Ashley, and she maintaining a cheerful outlook. Jaime attended an elite private prep school known for its academic excellence. Her friends and family saw her as a talented and enthusiastic person with a promising future in politics. During a school trip to the University of North Carolina in junior high, Jaime became enamored with the campus and aspired to attend the institution. As she grew older, she joined the board of the Center of Hope, which supported troubled teenagers. She also became involved in various political campaigns, including Senator John Edwards' 2008 presidential campaign. Jaime emerged as a prominent figure within the North Carolina Democratic Party. During this campaign, she met Nation, and the two developed a strong relationship. Over time, their relationship evolved from a platonic connection to a loved one. After just 4 months of dating, the couple got engaged and eventually married on April 18, 2009. Both Jaime and Nation were successful in their careers, with Jaime running her own consulting firm, focused on political fundraising, and Nation working as a well-known online strategist for politicians and nonprofits. People who knew them described them as exceptionally kind, tender, and generous. They have been actively involved in a project protecting young families in North Carolina. Although they didn't have children yet, they plan to start a family soon. Jonathan Broyhill, 31 years old, a close friend of Nation who had been staying in the couple's home as a guest. Jaime was also familiar with Jonathan, having hired him as an accountant at her political consulting firm after he moved to North Carolina. Nation and Jaime kindly him a place to stay in their home until he could find his own accommodation. Jonathan and Nation were from the same hometown, and their friendship began in 2000 during a church trip. Although they had a 4-year age difference, they quickly formed a close bond. Like many childhood friendships, they lost touch when one of them went to college, but reconnected after graduation and became very close. In fact, Jonathan was the best man at Nation and Jaime's wedding in April 2009. The trio of Jonathan, Jaime, and Nation was incredibly close-knit. This strong bond was built on unity, with the three sharing countless moments together. They go on vacation together, have dinner together every Monday, and enjoy holidays together. However, this was a difficult time for Jonathan, who had recently been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Jaime and Nation were deeply concerned about Jonathan's well-being and had been supporting him throughout his medical journey. Jaime was overcome with emotion one day and asked Nation if they should have a child soon. They wanted their future child to have the chance to know their dear friend Jonathan. The reason behind this sudden desire was Jonathan's recent cancer diagnosis. However, Jonathan's health struggles weren't new. Over the years, he had been in and out of hospitals multiple times. At one point, he had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis during a gallbladder operation. Given his fragile health, Jaime and Nation invited Jonathan to live with them temporarily. They offered him care and support until he could recover. Jonathan spent so much time at Nation family home that some of their neighbors thought of him as a part of the family. Their deep and close relationship makes the violent incident in which all three were stabbed in their own home all the more puzzling and tragic. On a fateful Monday, Jonathan was already at the house, discussing work-related matters with Jaime in the kitchen. Nation had just arrived home and was heading upstairs to change when they were startled by Jaime's screams. Assuming the worst due to Jonathan's health issues, Nation rushed downstairs, where they met Jaime's frantic voice, crying out for help. A frantic scene unfolded as Nation rushed into the kitchen, where he found his wife severely injured and bleeding on the floor, while Jonathan stood over her, menacingly wielding a large kitchen knife. The sight was too shocking for Nation to comprehend. Jonathan, with the knife raised, advanced toward Nation. Then, Nation with one hand, Nation grabbed the knife's blade and, with the other, struck Jonathan in the face. At the same time, Nation urgently told Jaime to run for safety as he tried to subdue Jonathan. She managed to get up from the floor despite her serious injuries and ran through the side door to find help. Once Jaime was out of the house, Nation overcame his shock, pushed Jonathan aside, and followed his wife. Outside, Jaime struggled to reach the nearest neighbor's house but found no one home despite her knocking. While trying to reach the next house, exhausted and weakened by her injuries, Jaime collapsed unconscious in the neighbor's yard. Fortunately, passers-by heard the commotion and came to her aid, and a neighbor who was alerted by Jaime's screams called for an ambulance and the police. Nation frantically searched for Jaime after realizing she was gone. Following a bloody trail, he found her in a neighbor's yard, clutching her side in agony but still conscious. Kneeling beside her, Nation held her hand and tried to reassure her, making promises about their future together, including children, vacations, and future anniversaries. Overwhelmed by the thought of losing her, Nation fought back tears as he spoke. As they waited for help to arrive, a neighbor rushed over with a towel to apply pressure to Jaime's bleeding abdomen. The towel quickly became soaked in blood. Another neighbor tried to make Jaime more comfortable by propping her legs up on a bag of leaves. The wait for an ambulance felt like an eternity to the onlookers. As minutes passed, Jaime's breathing became labored, a clear sign of her critical condition. The ambulance team arrived and immediately performed first aid to save Jaime's life. Nation, who had suffered serious cuts on his hand during the struggle, also needed immediate medical attention. Both Nation and Jaime were rushed to the hospital. Upon arrival, she was immediately wheeled in for emergency surgery. Nation stitched up his own wound, but his mind was preoccupied with fear for his wife's condition. In shock, he tried multiple times to visit her in the ICU but was denied access. Sitting on a hospital bed, he anxiously waiting for information on Jaime's condition. He also was aware of the severity of her injuries, numerous stab wounds, a severed artery, and extensive liver damage. All he could do was hope and pray that she would pull through. Against all odds, Jaime survived the surgery, but unfortunately, this brief moment of hope was short-lived. She never regained consciousness and passed away 2 days later. She succumbing to the injuries she sustained. The autopsy revealed that Jaime had suffered 24 stab wounds on various parts of her body, including her face, neck, back, hands, and forearms. The most severe injuries were inflicted on her abdomen and chest, which caused significant damage to her lungs and liver. After inflicting injuries on himself, Jonathan spent 8 days in the hospital recovering. On April 30, 2013, while still recovering and wearing bandages on both wrists, he was transported on a stretcher to a Wake County magistrate's office. There, he was officially charged with first-degree murder in Jaime's case and assault with a deadly weapon against another individual, Nation. Due to the severity of the charges, he was held without bail. Then taken to Central Prison in Raleigh, which had a hospital wing where he could continue receiving medical treatment while in custody. The sudden and tragic loss of Jaime left many people deeply affected and wondering why someone she considered a best friend would commit such a horrific act, robbing her of her future. After her death, rumors spread that a large amount of money had gone missing from the election campaign managed by Jaime's team. Jonathan, who had been the team's accountant, stopped working for the company at the end of 2012, but continued to provide financial information to Jaime and help with financial reports. Some people suspected that Jaime had discovered the missing funds, which totaled over $50,000, and confronted Jonathan about this. This confrontation might have triggered his violent outburst. On the day of the incident, April 22, 2013, Jaime had invited Jonathan to their usual Monday dinner to discuss the company's financial issues. Many believe that Jaime might have questioned Jonathan about the missing funds at that time. 6 months after the tragic incident, Jaime's husband, Nation, and her family scattered her ashes near the Pulaski Memorial Baptist Church. This church was a place Jaime had voluntarily dedicated a lot of time and effort to. A week before the tragedy. The irony is that Jaime had asked the church's pastor to pray for Jonathan, who was believed to be battling cancer. Little did Jaime know that their lives would soon be shattered. Nation had to come to terms with the fact that someone he had known since childhood had taken the life of the woman he loved. For Nation, Jaime was everything, his partner, his confidant. After Jamie's passing, the trial of Jonathan Broyhill began on March 4, 2015. The district attorney told the jury that Jonathan, Jamie's financial manager, had misappropriated around $50,000 from her account by writing 39 checks to himself. Jonathan made various excuses to justify his actions, including health problems from multiple sclerosis, memory issues, a gallbladder operation, and pancreatic cancer. According to Nation, Jaime knew about the missing money but chose not to confront Jonathan about it because his health is not good. Instead, she hopes Jonathan will admit his mistake and correct it on his own. However, everything changed when Jaime got a call from a debt collector. The district attorney revealed a shocking truth. A year prior, Jonathan's first hospitalization was a result of an incident at the Jaime residence. Prior to this, Jonathan had never medical treatment, which was confirmed by his health records. He had been deceiving Jaime and Nation about his health, falsely claiming to have had a gallbladder operation, multiple sclerosis, and cancer. In reality, his medical history only showed a mental disorder. Jonathan's internet search history showed he had researched pancreatic cancer and specialists in that field, possibly to make his fabrication more believable. He had also looked up cruises that did not require a passport. Furthermore, Jonathan had booked a one-way trip to Las Vegas for April 23, but canceled it on the 22nd, just 2 hours before attacking Jaime with a knife. Jonathan confessed to the authorities that he had misused campaign funds and fabricated his medical conditions. Although Jonathan said he needed medical attention, but he would secretly leave while Nation waited in the car. Nation did not know that he was deceiving them about his true intentions. Around this time, Jonathan was struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts. He was also experiencing auditory hallucinations, hearing voices that encouraged him to harm others. He had even purchased a knife with the intention of using it to end his life in Vegas. However, when Jaime confronted him about the financial irregularities, Jonathan's emotional state escalated, and he began inflicting injuries on himself. As the situation spiraled out of control, Jaime tried to intervene, but Jonathan's anger and delirium led him to attack her impulsively. He remembered attacking Jaime but had no recollection of chasing Nation. Jonathan's lawyer acknowledged that the evidence against him was overwhelming, making it impossible to dismiss the charges. Instead, they planned to argue for temporary insanity to reduce the sentence. On March 19, 2015, the jury delivered their verdict, finding Jonathan Broyhill guilty of murdering Jaime Han and attempting to murder Nation Han, both first-degree charges. The judge sentenced Jonathan to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angie Houseman. Angie Houseman was born on February 18, 1984, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father left the family before she was born, and she would never have the chance to meet him. However, her mother married a man named Ronald when she was 1 year old, and in the addition of a younger brother to the family. The two sisters got along very well, with Angie particularly fond of her younger brother. Angie was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, always striving to build relationships with those around her. Her family resided in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in St. Louis. In 1993, at the age of 9, Angie attended the 4th grade at a local elementary school, about a mile away from her home. Her daily go-to-school involved taking a bus from a nearby stop, which her parents considered relatively safe due to its proximity to their house. Typically, Angie and her neighborhood friends walked together from the school to the bus stop after class. There were many parents watching from their windows to ensure their safety. This has become a habit in their neighborhood, intended to provide peace of mind that children will return home safely. On November 18th, Angie followed her usual routine, attending school and finishing at 3 p.m. She took the school bus home with a few neighborhood kids. At that point, the other kids continued to their homes. Angie walked alone the short remaining distance home because her house was farther away. However, Angie didn't arrive home, and as the minutes passed, her parents started to worry. They knew Angie often chatted with friends on her way home, but it has never taken this long. Concerned, Angie's mom and stepdad decided to walk along her route from the house to the bus stop to see if they could find her. While walking, they met other kids from Angie's school. They confirmed she had gotten off the bus with them and headed in the direction of her home. The parents also spoke with neighbors who usually kept an eye on the kids, but were preoccupied on that particular day and hadn't seen anything. Angie's parents became more and more worried and insecure. They and their friends started searching the area along her route from the bus stop to their home. As the sun began to set and darkness fell, they didn't give up. Realizing Angie was unlikely to wander off in the cold weather, the parents eventually decided to call the police. The police immediately joined the search for Angie. Due to the cold weather, it seemed unlikely that she would wander off alone. Therefore, the police initially focused on investigating whether she had been kidnapped. 10 days before Angie went missing, an 11-year-old girl was almost kidnapped in a nearby area, which made everyone even more concerned. An unknown person approached the girl as she got off the school bus and attempted to pull her into the bushes. Fortunately, she managed to escape. However, since the assailant was still at large, the police believed he might be linked to Angie's disappearance. To investigate, officers deployed K-9 units, which detected Angie's scent near the bus stop. The dogs tracked the scent about halfway to her house, but lost it suddenly, suggesting that Angie might have gotten into a vehicle at that location, which further supported the possibility of an abduction. The police expanded their search for Angie by deploying helicopters with thermal sensors and scouring the banks of a nearby stream, but they failed to locate either the girl or her belongings. The first day, the search turned up no results. As the investigation unfolded, the police released information about Angie's disappearance to the media, which quickly spread throughout the city. The police department receiving over 300 calls within 24 hours. To manage the influx of leads, more than 20 additional officers were assigned to the case. However, none of these clues were helpful in finding Angie. The detectives pursued every lead, with a strong focus on Angie's stepfather from the beginning. Despite this, he insisted he was innocent and willingly cooperated with the investigation, even agreeing to take a lie detector test in an effort to clear his name and help the police focus on finding Angie. During the investigation into Angie's biological father, a new piece of information came to light. Although he had never been in direct contact with his daughter, but the biological father had allegedly driven past her house multiple times to watch her play outside, according to Angie's mother. While detectives found this behavior suspicious, the biological father had a solid alibi that checked out. By the third day, the FBI joined the investigation, and the police department allocated even more officers to the case. It was clear to everyone that something serious had happened to Angie, as she could barely survive on the streets in such harsh weather conditions. A break in the case came when a witness in Angie's neighborhood reported seeing a suspicious man driving a blue sedan. The description matched a person who had attempted to abduct a girl just 10 days earlier. Based on this, investigators created a composite sketch, which was featured in the media and appearing on thousands of distributed flyers. Unfortunately, the identity of the suspect remained a mystery. As Angie's disappearance gained national attention through television, the number of leads increased. Police carefully evaluated each one but found no connections to the case. However, as the case drew more public attention, psychics started contacting Angie's family, claiming to have had visions of the missing girl. One psychic even named a specific location, a large national park 25 miles from Angie's home, where they believed she was being held. However, detectives chose not to pursue this information. To encourage tips, a $10,000 reward was offered for any information about Angie's location, resulting in an influx of tips. During the investigation, detectives discovered a disturbing detail. A few days before she disappeared, Angie mentioned to her teacher that she would be going on a nature trip with her uncle. However, this statement raised red flags, as Angie did not actually have an uncle, and her parents were unaware of what she meant by this claim. Detectives considered the possibility that Angie might have known the person who took her, referring to them as her uncle in conversation. Despite their efforts, investigators failed to uncover any information about this mysterious individual in the days that followed. The case seemed to be at a standstill until 9 days after Angie's disappearance, on November 27th. A young girl's body was discovered near a tree, severely mistreated. She had no clothing on and was bound with handcuffs. Her head was completely covered in tape, except for a small exposed area around her nose. A nearby bag contained personal items, including notebooks with her name, that confirmed the body was that of Angie. Autopsies by medical examiners revealed more disturbing details about Angie's death. A piece of underwear was found stuffed in her mouth after the tape on her head was removed. The investigation determined that she had died just hours before her discovery and had likely been held captive for 9 days before succumbing. Furthermore, experts concluded that Angie suffered numerous physical injuries and endured a sexual assault. A thorough examination of the crime scene by forensic experts led to the discovery of a fingerprint on the tape used to cover Angie's head. The police tried to find matching information in the database and between several suspects, but didn't bring any clues. Following the discovery of the body, the police increased their efforts in the investigation. As news of the tragic incident spread, local residents became fearful, increasing their vigilance. To protect their children, they started escorting them to and from school, meeting them at bus stops, and keeping a close watch over them at all times. On December 1st, a 10-year-old girl named Casey Dissa went missing in a nearby town, just 10 miles from Angie's house. Casey had received permission from her mother to visit friends who lived a short distance away. But she never made it to their home. The police were unsuccessful in locating her, fueling the detectives' fear that they might be dealing with a serial killer. Initially, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the same person was responsible for both Angie's and Casey's disappearances. However, they lacked evidence to support this theory. 10 days later, Casey's body was found in St. Louis, wrapped in bedding in the curtain. The cause of death was determined to be severe head trauma from multiple blows. Despite the investigation, detectives were unable to uncover any leads pointing to the killer. Furthermore, the distinct nature of the two crimes led them to reconsider their initial theory. As a result, they began to consider the possibility of two separate murderers in the same month. Investigations into Angie's disappearance led detectives to identify a man who had attempted to abduct another girl a few days earlier. The suspect, 37-year-old Gary, frequently traveled to St. Louis for work. Although he became a person of interest in the murders of Angie and Casey, he had a solid alibi for the time they went missing. However, during questioning, Gary admitted to assaulting 4 other girls and was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. The following February, the case took a new turn. Near where Casey's body was found, investigators found tire tracks that were associated with a pickup truck from a well-known rental car company known for its distinctive logo. Detectives showed photos of the tire tracks to locals, asking if they had seen a pickup truck from that company in the area. The detectives received a crucial lead. One woman came forward, saying she had seen such a pickup near her neighbor's house about a week after Casey's disappearance. After investigation, the police discovered that the house belonged to a woman living with her husband and brother. She claimed none of them had rented the pickup and maintained they were not connected to the case. However, detectives remained skeptical and obtained a search warrant for the house. The search revealed blood matching Casey's in the basement, along with the murder weapon. A further investigation uncovered key information in Casey's case. The pickup truck used to transport the body was rented by Thomas, the brother of the woman who owned the house. Initially, Thomas denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with the existing evidence, he eventually confessed. According to Thomas's statement, Casey knocked on his door and wanted to invite his nephews to come out with her. Thomas invited Casey into the house and led her to the basement, where he attempted to assault her. When Casey screamed, Thomas hit her with a heavy object, ultimately killing her. He then covered her body with bed sheets. Despite committing the crime, Thomas went to work as usual. Upon returning home, Thomas' sister told him that she had discovered the body in the basement, but she didn't want to know what had happened and asked that it be disposed of quickly. Casey's body remained in the basement for a week because outside, the search was still going on for her. Thomas was too afraid to move Casey's body until the investigation died down. Once the situation became less intense, Thomas rented a pickup truck, transported Casey's body to St. Louis, and abandoned it there. Thomas was eventually convicted of Casey's murder and received a death sentence. However, he died in prison several years later due to illnesses before the sentence could be carried out. During the investigation, Thomas denied any connection to Angie's case, leading detectives to believe that the two cases were not connected. The investigation into Angie's murder stagnated for many months, with the number of leads dwindling over time. Years later, detectives encountered a new obstacle: the expiration of the reward for providing information, which detectives feared would decrease public involvement. However, a local businessman donated $250,000 to incentivize people to come forward with information. This bonus was one of the biggest at the time, generated a large number of tips, but disappointingly, the case remains unsolved. In 2001, a prison inmate named Corey Fox contacted detectives and confessed to over 10 murders, including the murder of Angie Houseman. Detectives met with Corey, then he recounted how he and an accomplice abducted Angie from the street and held her captive in his house for several days. Initially, the plan was to demand a ransom in exchange for Angie's safe return. However, Corey and his accomplice became concerned that they might be identified and decided to murder her. Corey provided detectives with many accurate details about the crime, including the fact that Angie was tied to a tree and that his accomplice used her underwear as a gag. However, some discrepancies arose during the questioning, particularly with regards to how Angie was restrained. Corey claimed that they used plastic handcuffs, but evidence showed that perpetrator actually used iron handcuffs. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Corey could not have committed some of the murders he confessed to. As a result, police concluded that he likely fabricated parts of his confession, possibly drawing information from media of Angie's case. In the summer of 2002, when a 6-year-old girl was abducted from her home and murdered in a different St. Louis neighborhood. Authorities initially considered whether the two crimes were connected, but this theory proved unfounded. The killer, a neighbor, was quickly caught and confessed during questioning. The investigation into Angie's case lay dormant for several years, until 2007, when detectives reopened the file. Upon reviewing the case documents, they stumbled upon a noteworthy detail. Shortly after Angie's body was discovered, police had found a man named Roger Martin sitting in a parked car nearby. When questioned about his emergence, Roger claimed he was in the area to go hunting. However, a search of his vehicle revealed no hunting equipment, raising suspicions about his true intentions. The new detective team decided to investigate Roger further, which revealed his prior convictions for crimes against children. Notably, one of his past victims was assaulted near the area where Angie's body was discovered. All of these crimes happened before Angie's death, but the police had failed to thoroughly look into Roger at the time. This meant that the new team had to start over from the beginning. The detectives brought Roger in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in Angie's murder. He claimed that he just happened to be near that location. The interrogation lasted 9 hours, but still yielded no new clues. The police compared Roger's fingerprints with the ones on the tape found on Angie's head, but the experts found that they did not match. As a result, Roger was released. Although the police continued to consider him a suspect, they lacked sufficient evidence to hold him. The case of Angie saw a breakthrough in 2018, when the St. Louis Police Department created a task force specifically to investigate this case. With the advancement of technology, the detectives re-examined the existing evidence, searching for new leads. Their investigation centered on 3 crucial pieces of evidence: the handcuffs, the tape from Angie's head, and her underwear used as a gag. Despite repeated efforts since 1993, experts had struggled to detect the perpetrator's DNA on these items. The task force decided to re-examine the evidence with modern technology. The detectives first focused on the handcuffs but encountered a difficulty due to the presence of Angie's blood covering almost the entire surface. Next, they turned their attention to the tape from Angie's head, but faced another obstacle. Upon opening the box containing the evidence, they discovered that the tape had deteriorated significantly over time. Finally, they examined the underwear that had been used to gag Angie. Although they did not have much hope for this evidence, since it had been in her mouth for hours, so it was likely that any foreign DNA had been removed. However, they still investigated it as a last resort. Using advanced technology, they carefully examined every inch of the underwear, leading to a breakthrough. A small sample of DNA was found, sufficient for analysis. The experts confirmed the DNA belonged to a male and immediately uploaded it to the FBI database. Although it is common for DNA searches to yield no matches, requiring additional investigation, the detectives were fortunate in this case. As soon as the DNA sample was uploaded, they received a full match. The DNA belonged to 58-year-old Earl Cox, who had been incarcerated since 2003. In the investigation into Angie's case, Earl Cox initially had not been on the police's radar, but his criminal record was substantial. His history of crime dated back to 1982, when he was serving in the military in Germany and working as a part-time babysitter for girls reported being sexually assaulted by Earl, resulting in an 8-year prison sentence in the United States. He was subsequently discharged from the Army after serving only 3 years. Earl was released from prison early and moved to St. Louis. However, 4 years later, he found himself in trouble with the law again. In this instance, he was arrested after 2 7-year-old girls accused him of sexually assaulting them. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, the arrest itself was a parole violation. As a result, Earl received an additional year in prison. After serving this extra year, Earl was released in 1992 and settled in St. Louis, where his relatives lived. The following year, a tragic incident happened. Earl abducted and killed Angie. In 2002, Earl was arrested again for operating a secret online platform where individuals shared child abuse content. The FBI had been monitoring his activities and set a trap by having an undercover agent pose as a 14-year-old girl and make contact with him. Earl made explicit intentions to exploit the girl and sent money for her to meet him. However, when Earl showed up at the meeting place, he was met by armed FBI agents instead of the girl. This led to his arrest. A search of his computer revealed a massive collection of over 45,000 images of child abuse. Further investigation also revealed that Earl was the mastermind behind the platform, leading to the arrest of 60 more individuals associated with the site. This operation was one of the largest against pedophiles in the country. In 2003, Earl was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, when his sentence ended, a judge used a legal loophole to keep Earl in detention, citing him as a serious threat to children. As a result, Earl remained in prison. In 2019, a DNA match linked Earl to Angie Houseman's case. Detectives visited him in prison, but Earl denied involvement and requested a lawyer. Despite the strong DNA evidence, investigators took an alternative approach. They offered Earl's lawyer a deal. In exchange for Earl's confession, the prosecution would drop the death penalty and pursue a life sentence instead. Earl agreed, likely aware that he would lose the case in court. When detectives returned to the prison, Earl shared his account of incident. Although some details raised suspicions, his admission to the murder was the key point for investigators. Earl claimed that on November 18, 1993, he was driving through his family's neighborhood when his car broke down. And while he was trying to find out what was wrong with the car, a school bus pulled up and children disembarked. While the others went home, Angie remained outside, drawing Earl's attention. Earl claimed that when Angie approached him, they had a brief chat, and he noticed she seemed extremely cold. He offered her a ride in his car, which she allegedly accepted. Earl then took Angie to Burger King to get food, and afterwards, took her to his home. Here, he sexually assaulted her for several days. Eventually, Earl decided to dispose of Angie, drove her to a remote location, where her body was later found, and tied her to a tree. However, she was still alive at that time. Detectives had doubts about certain parts of Earl's story. They didn't think Angie would agree to go anywhere with a stranger, especially since she only had a short distance to walk home. Investigators have questioned Earl's story about the car breakdown, as he claimed the car stalled but started again as soon as Angie approached. It seems more likely that Earl saw Angie and decided to abduct her. A more probable scenario is that he lured her into the car by lying or threatening her. This is more credible than his confession. Detectives were to obtain the confession they needed for the murder. Earl Cox was sentenced to life in prison without parole by a judge in August 2020. Although justice had been served, it came too late for Angie's mother, who had passed away from cancer in 2016. Her husband, Ronald, felt that Cox's actions had indirectly contributed to her death. As her grief over losing Angie had weakened her health and will to live, ultimately leading to her passing. For Earl, his sentence was more than just the initial verdict. Authorities re-examined a previous case of sexual abuse, involving two 7-year-old girls, for which Earl had initially received a lenient sentence. At that time, he had only spent 1 year in prison for violating his parole. However, years later, investigators contacted one of his victims, now an adult, and asked for her testimony against him. Faced with the of a life sentence, Earl chose to plead guilty and as a result, received an additional 10-year prison sentence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to parents Lisa Carter and Jay Poston. He had a close and loving relationship with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Ryan spent a significant portion of his teenage years traveling and studying abroad, attending schools in both Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan was known for his adventurous nature, exceptional physical appearance, and charismatic personality, made him a standout among his peers. After high school, he attended Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. Ryan graduated with honors in 2005. Following his family's tradition, Ryan decided to pursue a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Ryan had a profound respect for the legal profession, inspired by his grandfather and uncle, who were both attorneys. He had ambitious goals, one of which is the dream of owning a law firm. For the time being, Ryan worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated himself to offering affordable legal services to individuals who could not afford higher-priced attorneys. Although still young, Ryan had already built a considerable reputation. He attracted many clients seeking his advice and guidance. He worked diligently to ensure that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, had access to fair and competent legal representation. In 2011, Ryan has been through a painful breakup. He often visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, Kentucky, seeking comfort and support. On one of these visits, his life underwent a dramatic change after an encounter with Shaina Michelle Hubers. Originally from Lexington, Kentucky, Shaina was a Southern, and is the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her extroverted and sociable personality. Her warmth and charm drew people to her. After graduating from high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she studied psychology at the University of Kentucky. She then pursued her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their age gap, Ryan, 29, and Shaina, 21, couldn't deny their strong feelings for each other. Whenever Ryan visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he ended up spending more time with Shaina, and their connection deepened. As their relationship grew, Shaina began to spend most of her weekends in Highland Heights, Kentucky, where Ryan lived. She'd pack her bags, head to his home, and take care of him, cooking and cleaning for him. As time passed, their feelings grew deeper and deeper. Ryan introduced Shaina to his parents. She couldn't hide her excitement from her friends, raving about Ryan, and shares her dream of becoming Ryan's wife. However, the promising future of Ryan and Shaina came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. On that day, Shaina called the authorities and reported that she had just killed her boyfriend, Ryan. According to Shaina, the incident began when Ryan attempted to physically abuse her. He allegedly dragged her out of the house when she tried to collect her belongings, and he confronted her with a gun. The situation became very tense and turned into a violent brawl, during which Shaina gained control of the firearm. Feeling intimidated by Ryan's, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting him. Believing Ryan was fatally wounded and wanting to end his suffering, she shot him several more times. Shaina believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she wanted to end his suffering. After the shooting, Shaina placed the gun on a bookshelf and called 911 to report the incident. When officers arrived, they requested her to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite initial hesitation, but she complied, following the officer's instructions to lie face down on the ground. Throughout that time, Shaina appeared visibly upset. After handcuffing Shaina and placing her in the patrol vehicle, the officers entered the apartment. Inside, they found Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Investigators then arrived and surveyed Ryan's condo. The condo appeared somewhat messy, but not unusually so for a 29-year-old man. Further investigation revealed that Ryan had a permit to carry a concealed weapon and owned firearms. The gun used by Shaina to shoot Ryan was identified as his own Sig Sauer semi-automatic pistol. Based on evidence from the apartment, investigators concluded Ryan was sitting at the table when Shaina started shooting. Blood on the table confirmed this. However, several items on the dining table were untouched, contradicting Shaina's account of a struggle. Typically, a fight would have knocked these items out of place. Investigators thoroughly examined Ryan's apartment for clues. Simultaneously, officers went door to door in the neighborhood to gather more information from Ryan's neighbors. A neighbor named Nikki provided valuable information to the detective. She knows Shaina well and feels Shaina is more responsible for the relationship than Ryan. Nikki reported that the couple often had loud arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Months earlier, Shaina had visited Nikki, crying and expressing her fear of Ryan. Shaina claimed that a violent altercation with Ryan had left her injured, and he threw her down the hallway. Nikki believed Shaina's story and urged her to report the incident to the police. However, Shaina decided not to do that. When Shaina was at the police station, detectives interviewed her about the shooting of boyfriend Ryan. Before they started the questioning, the officers told Shaina her rights, which informed her that she had the right to a lawyer. Shaina asked for a lawyer, so the questioning was put on hold. While she waited in the interrogation room, she filled out some paperwork, under the supervision of a detective. Shaina chose to speak with the detective despite asking for an attorney. When asked the name of the victim, Shaina showed no emotion, simply stating, "the man she killed," clearly referring to her long-term boyfriend, Ryan. During the interrogation, Shaina explained that she acted in self-defense. She claimed Ryan had physically attacked her, grabbing her throat and throwing her around their apartment. During a break in the interrogation, the detective stepped out of the room and another officer took over. Shaina then shared new information with the officer about her confrontation with Ryan. She stated that before the shooting, Ryan said mean and unpleasant things to her, calling her unhinged and taunting her while holding a gun. Shaina attributed Ryan's violent behavior that night to being under the influence of substances. She maintained her account of the incident leading up to the shooting, claiming Ryan was sitting at the dining table handling ammunition for his pistol. She caught him staring at her from across the table and believed this was a sign that he intended to kick her out of his condo. Shaina admitted to seizing the opportunity to grab the gun and shoot Ryan. In the midst of chaos, Shaina fired one shot at Ryan, hitting him. Shaina initially thought she needed to end his suffering, as he was twitching after the first shot, and proceeded to fire several more shots, ultimately resulting in Ryan's death. Shaina revealed in her confession that Ryan was self-conscious about his appearance, especially his nose, and had previously expressed a desire to get a nose job. With this knowledge, Shaina intentionally shot Ryan in the face, claiming she was granting his wish. Throughout the interrogation, Shaina revealed that she was worried her relationship would be affected if people found out her boyfriend was dead. Specifically, she feared that no one would want to marry her if they knew she had killed her boyfriend, even if it was in self-defense. After hearing her out, the detective arrested Shaina and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shaina appeared to be surprised by her arrest, insisting that she had only shot Ryan to protect herself, and apparently expecting a different outcome. In 2015, Shaina's trial started, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor began by comparing Shaina to Jodi Arias, another woman who had been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases were striking. This comparison increased the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited to see what would happen. The prosecutor argued that Shaina was fixated on her boyfriend, Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. According to the prosecution, Shaina's conversations were dominated by talk of Ryan. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a narrative of Ryan's intentions based on his friends' accounts. According to them, Ryan planned to end his relationship with Shaina and intentionally avoid her phone calls and texts. Despite these things, Shaina continued to show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had plans to meet Audrey Bolt, the 2012 Miss Ohio, for a date on the night of the murder. This new information supported the prosecution's theory that Shaina was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new relationship. Audrey testified that she had arranged to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar that night and waited for him, but he never arrived. It was only later that she discovered he had been shot and killed. During Shaina's trial, the prosecution showed the jury evidence that Ryan had often expressed his wish to end their relationship. Shortly before his death, Ryan called his father, Jay, for advice on how to handle the situation. Jay told Ryan to be kind to Shaina to avoid an ugly breakup. Despite Ryan wanting to break up with Shaina peacefully, but she continued to manipulate him. On the day of Ryan's death, evidence showed that he spent a lot of time texting with Shaina. In these texts, Ryan clearly told her that he didn't want to see her that weekend because he had other plans. Nevertheless, Shaina showed up at his condo uninvited, which was a common occurrence. The prosecution argued that during the argument, Ryan told Shaina it was over and she could no longer control him. This enraged Shaina, who then shot Ryan in a fit of rage. In trial, the prosecution played a video of Shaina's interrogation to show the jury that she was a cold-blooded killer. The video showed Shaina dancing and singing, seemingly unaffected by the departure of her boyfriend, Ryan. After killing a loved one in self-defense, most people would be extremely upset, crying and overwhelmed by what they had done. By showing the video, the prosecution argued that Shaina was a very emotionless person and did not feel remorse for what she did, implying that she didn't act like someone who had killed in self-defense. However, this explanation is not objective and depends on the jury's perspective. The interrogation video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shaina. However, it was not the only evidence presented during the trial. Shaina's defense team stuck to a consistent story throughout the trial. They claimed that Ryan was the one who behaved erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to Shaina shooting him. To support this claim, the defense team described Ryan's state of mind. They alleged that the combination of medications he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines, is the cause. To strengthen their argument, Shaina's attorneys presented autopsy results to the jury, prove that Ryan was using these drugs at the time of his death. This evidence suggested that Ryan's actions may have been influenced by the medications he is taking. The defense also called an expert toxicologist to testify that combining anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines could lead to violent and paranoid behavior. The goal of this testimony was to create a plausible explanation for Shaina's actions and then prove that she killed Ryan in self-defense. During Shaina's trial in April 2015, the prosecution was concerned that she would be acquitted because she was an intelligent, young, and beautiful woman. They worried that her self-defense claims might sway the jury. However, on April 23, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shaina Michelle Hubers of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shaina continued to blame Ryan for his death, which outraged his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shaina maintained her innocence and refused to take responsibility for her actions. In Kentucky, a defendant who is a victim of domestic violence may be eligible for parole after serving 20% of their sentence. However, the judge did not grant Shaina this reduced parole, citing that she had committed a premeditated murder. Shaina was sentenced to 40 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 17 years, in 2032, when she is 41 years old. Shaina appealed her sentence and was granted a new trial in August 2016. The appeal was granted because one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, after a 4-month delay, Shaina's second trial began. During opening arguments, Shaina's defense attorney stated that she had made every effort to please Ryan for the entire time they were together, a year and a half. But in the end, their love story encountered problems. According to the defense team, on the first night Shaina and Ryan met, he committed physical and sexual violence against her. This incident had a profound and lasting effect on Shaina, causing her to take several weeks to respond to Ryan's messages afterward. The defense claimed that Shaina's history of trauma began in high school when she was sexually assaulted. This led to her struggling with alcohol addiction and sexual promiscuity for many years. Her defense team argued that this traumatic experience significantly influenced her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense strategy aimed to create a sympathetic of Shaina by sharing her troubled past. They sought to prove that Shaina was not fully in control of her actions on the night of the murder. The defense hoped to show that Shaina's behavior was the result of a mix of factors. These factors included her history of abuse and her toxic relationship with Ryan. The goal was to show that Shaina was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. The defense argued that Shaina's actions were not driven by a desire for revenge or financial gain. Instead, they were the result of years of abuse she suffered at the hands of Ryan. Shaina's defense attorney argued that Ryan's constant criticism about her weight and chest size, as well as his pressure on her to get breast enlargement, significantly affected her self-esteem. The defense claimed that this criticism, along with the strain in their sexual relationship, contributed to Shaina's feelings of inadequacy. The defense presented evidence that Shaina had sought medical help to improve their romantic life, getting an injection to address their sexual difficulties. However, Ryan's rejection and lack of interest made the problems in their relationship worse, leaving Shaina feeling frustrated and isolated. Additionally, the defense alleged that Ryan would often end things with Shaina and then talk to other women, further straining the problems in their relationship. During their opening statement, the prosecution told the jury that they wouldn't portray Ryan as a perfect boyfriend. However, they made it clear that he wasn't abusive. They claimed that Shaina shot and killed Ryan not in self-defense. The prosecution alleged that Shaina shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship on the night of the incident. Ryan had decided it was time to break up with Shaina because she would not leave him alone. According to the prosecution, Shaina's repeated returns to Ryan after he ended things demonstrated her inability to move on from the relationship. During the trial, the prosecution showed text messages from Shaina to her friends. These messages stated that the intimate activities between Shaina and Ryan had strengthened their relationship. However, when Shaina took the stand in her own defense during her second trial, she disagreed. She claimed that these activities had actually pushed them further apart. In another set of text messages, Shaina had asked to have sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants. The medication's side effects had reduced his sex drive. However, when Shaina testified, she alleged that Ryan had forced her into having sex. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Shaina Michelle Hubers of murdering Ryan Poston for the second time. Despite conflicting testimonies and evidence, they upheld their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shaina's mother emotionally shared her daughter's singing talent and how it earned her multiple college scholarships. Choked with emotion, she asked the jury to consider the possibility of parole for Shaina. However, she acknowledged this didn't lessen the grief and suffering that Ryan's family was experiencing. Shaina Michelle Hubers was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She must serve at least 17 years before being considered for parole in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila Labar. Sheila Labar was born in Fort Payne, Alabama on July 4, 1958. She was the youngest of 3 children and grew up on a farm surrounded by cornfields with her siblings, including her older brother and sister Lynn. According to Lynn, her older sibling, Sheila was an energetic, inquisitive, and creative girl. She loved being the center of attention, had a beautiful singing voice, and was very pretty. Her father Manuel Bailey's struggle with alcoholism had a profound impact on his family, especially his children, during their formative years. When affected, he became extremely aggressive and abusive, directing his anger at his wife and children. He would insult and humiliate them, attack them with any available object, and even force them to sleep outdoors, enduring the elements. Many times, Manuel's wife and children had no choice but to seek shelter in barns or fields, enduring harsh weather conditions such as heavy rain or freezing temperatures. Manuel's violent outbursts were a regular occurrence in the family. On one occasion, he threw dishes and objects at family members in a drunken rage. The mother tried to shield her children but was unsuccessful. A flower pot hit the youngest daughter, Sheila, in the head, causing her a severe concussion and leaving a permanent scar on her temple that she later covered with her hair. However, physical abuse was not the only trauma the sisters endured. According to Sheila and Lynn's memories, Manuel forced them into forced sex from a young age. Even though the mother may have known what was going on, she never addressed the problem or sought help for her daughters. Sheila studied very well, finding solace in her academic achievements in the midst of a difficult family life. She dreamed of escaping the countryside to pursue her ambitions in the city. With fierce determination and intense passion, Sheila aspired to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or a pop singer. She had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a wonderful voice. Sheila's upbringing was tumultuous. At the age of 18, she left her parents' house, but adult life was difficult. She did not pass the university entrance exam because of her average grades, and she simply did not have the money to move to the big city. Therefore, Sheila took a job as a maid in a hotel where her sister worked. Sheila had a slim figure and a very attractive appearance, big blue eyes, a charming smile, and long, thick hair. She was given attention by men, and over time, she learned to use that attention and manipulate her suitors. Sheila met Jonathan Baxter in the late 1970s and they began a romantic relationship. Although Jonathan was not yet 20 years old, he had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a barrier, and the couple soon married. However, their marriage did not last long and ended in divorce within a few months. The reason for the breakup was Sheila's treatment of Jonathan's daughter. She often became frustrated with the child and resorted to physical discipline, such as hitting her, or isolation, such as locking her in a closet when the child misbehaved or cried. When Jonathan discovered this, he was extremely distressed and immediately filed for divorce. He acted quickly, removing Sheila and her belongings from the house and making it clear that he never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila continued to date many men, and she often relied on them financially, but these relationships did not last long, lasting only a few weeks to a few months. However, in the early 1980s, she met Ronnie Jennings, who would later become her second husband. Their tumultuous love affair soon led to marriage. Unfortunately, it was an unhealthy relationship between two erratic and unstable people who often cheated on each other, caused scandals, and even fought. However, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after an argument, Sheila asked her husband for a divorce. But he refused. However, Ronnie's motive behind refusing her request was not to save the relationship. He just wanted to irritate his wife and drive her crazy. He succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large amount of drugs in front of her husband, drank strong alcohol, and after this terrifying cocktail, got behind the wheel and drove off the road. As expected, Sheila lost consciousness shortly after and drove off the road at high speed, crashing into a tree. Despite the severity of the accident, Sheila miraculously survived, although she suffered severe head injuries that left her in a deep coma for over a week. During this time, medical professionals were unable to give any prognosis for her recovery. Sheila eventually recovered from her coma and was transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where she remained for several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the attendants was constantly harassing her. After all this, she was discharged from the hospital and returned to her second husband's home. But her behavior became increasingly erratic. She began to act aggressively and threaten him, culminating in a violent outburst in which she attacked Ronnie with nail scissors, stabbing him in the chest. Fearing for her safety and well-being, Ronnie filed for divorce and quickly moved away, ending their tumultuous relationship. After her second divorce, Sheila began looking for a lover through the dating columns of print newspapers and left her information there. She posted her information herself in the hope of meeting someone special, but her relationships did not last long. The reason was that she had a controlling personality, often dominating her partners in both her private and daily life. One day, a 60-year-old man named Wilfred Bill Labar happened to see her picture in the dating section. A twice-divorced man, Wilfred raised his children and grandchildren from previous marriages. After losing his wife a few years ago, he lived a solitary life on his large rural farm. Wilfred, a wealthy man from New Hampshire, owned a chiropractic practice and a horse farm. Despite his successful life, he still felt lonely and longed for a partner. It was then that he met Sheila, who was attracted by Wilfred's wealth and saw an opportunity for her. To attract his attention, Sheila began sending him provocative letters and photos through the post. Her plan worked, and soon Wilfred invited her to visit his farm. Their romance quickly blossomed, with Wilfred showering her with expensive gifts. In the summer of 1987, Sheila moved in with him. Wilfred Bill Labar had no plans to marry Sheila. However, without waiting for his proposal, Sheila changed her name, calling herself Labar. Bill was surprised by this development, but he did not object. As their relationship progressed, Sheila began to control Wilfred's life, including his business, finances, and property. Due to the significant age difference, Wilfred had a hard time satisfying Sheila's need for intimacy. According to Sheila, Wilfred allowed her to see other men, and she often brought her lovers to their homes. One of Sheila's lovers, who was in his mid-90s, was a Jamaican citizen named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as a nanny at the farm. Wayne eventually moved into the main house with Wilfred's consent, possibly under pressure from Sheila. Sheila and Wayne married in 1995 with an agreement that they would be monogamous, and Wayne assumed that from then on, he would be her only man. However, he soon realized that he was wrong as his wife continued to see other men. Wayne was not happy with this, and one day, he punched and kicked Sheila and her next lover, injuring them. Sheila, accustomed to being dominated, was the first time she had been attacked by someone else. She eventually filed for divorce and obtained a court order to prevent Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Sheila's life remained volatile despite the divorce, as she continued to have affairs, frequently ending old relationships in favor of new ones. However, her relationships became increasingly complicated, often ending in lawsuits from her ex-partners who accused her of cruelty, threatening their lives, and causing physical harm. In one case, an ex-boyfriend claimed she deliberately hit him with her car, narrowly avoiding serious injury. Another accused her of fracturing his skull, while a third partner was left permanently scarred by lacerations to his face. As Sheila got older, her behavior became increasingly dangerous to those around her. She demanded absolute obedience from her partners, and when this expectation was not met, she often flew into rages. Wilfred Bill Labar then died in 2000 of heart failure at the age of 74. Although doctors and police found no evidence of foul play in his death, his family believed that Sheila had something to do with it. According to them, she had been poisoning Bill little by little over the years, effectively driving him to his death. After Wilfred's death, Sheila became the sole beneficiary of his estate, even though the couple had never formally married. Relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They still believe that Sheila forced him to write a will. She wanted the house after Wilfred's death. After inheriting his entire estate, Sheila was free to do whatever she wanted without having to consider anyone else's opinion. She called her home a place of glamour and pleasure where there were no inhibitions. And she began picking up men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, luring them to her and then trying to keep them at the farm for as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or appearance. Sheila lured these men with promises of extraordinary pleasure and then tried to dominate and control them. Neighbors noticed that there were many different men constantly coming to the farm, but many left that day, while others stayed for a short time. The activities inside the house were shrouded in mystery. Sheila then turned her focus to finding sexual partners among men who were in financial trouble, needed a place to live, or were struggling with addiction. These people are easy targets for Sheila's manipulation tactics, as she presents herself as a wealthy widow, bragging about her supposed inheritance from 2004. A homeless man named Michael DeLog is struggling with addiction when he meets Sheila on a city street. Due to his circumstances, his family tries to get him into rehab, but he escapes from the treatment center. Michael's weakness leads him to accept Sheila's offer, who promises him food, shelter, and the stimulants he desires in exchange for a physical relationship. Moving to the farm, Michael becomes completely dependent on his lover. Afraid of being on the streets again, he complies with her every demand, and Sheila's desires become more sophisticated. She binds, beats, and humiliates Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they would not believe him. Sheila repeatedly found Michael and brought him back to the farm. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. They responded immediately, but unfortunately, it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLog mysteriously disappeared. When his family contacted Sheila, she claimed that they had broken up and Michael had left her, not knowing where he was. Despite efforts to find him, Michael was nowhere to be seen and no one he knew had seen him. Unfortunately, attempts to contact him were unsuccessful and the police report was fruitless, and Sheila remained unsuspected. While her house and car needed maintenance, so she was forced to find work. She chose a career that suited her, becoming an operator for intimate telephone services, using her charming voice to make a living. A man named Kenneth County, then 24 years old, fell into the trap and agreed to meet her in person. Kenneth was an attractive young man, kind and open, but he had one major weakness: his low IQ made him extremely gullible. This made him Sheila's ideal target. Kenneth was very close to his mother, financially dependent on her, but Sheila skillfully manipulated him, creating a rift between them and finally conquered him. She gave him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams. He informed his relatives, and then moved into Sheila's house. After that, Sheila severely and relentlessly abused Kenneth. She had turned one of the rooms in her house into a torture chamber, where she regularly beat Kenneth severely and subjected him to other forms of physical and mental abuse. As a result, Kenneth's body was covered in numerous injuries, including bruises, abrasions, cuts, and burns. Kenneth was completely under Sheila's control and was not allowed to contact his loved ones. His family had no idea what was happening to him and could only speculate about his condition. It was only when neighbors occasionally saw Kenneth and were shocked by his frail appearance that the alarm was raised. Just days before Kenneth went missing, a local store employee took a disturbing photo of him with his cell phone, which was later used as evidence in court. The photo showed Kenneth extremely thin, with large bruises under his eyes and on his cheeks, and what appeared to be a broken nose, judging by the extent of the healing. All of these injuries occurred at different times, suggesting that he had been severely beaten over a long period of time. When he went to a store, the items in his trolley were disturbing: 2 large fuel drums, which were later discovered to have been used to cremate him. The store staff were confused and frightened by his appearance, so they contacted the police, suspecting a possible domestic violence incident. However, Sheila escaped and they were unable to charge her. Eventually, Kenneth lost contact with his family, and when his worried mother visited him at the farm owner, Sheila, responded aggressively and advised her to leave Kenneth alone, prompting Kenneth's family to file a missing person report, expressing concern that he might be being held against his will at the farm. When the police arrived at Sheila's home, they witnessed a crematorium and disturbing discoveries. Sheila claimed that Kenneth had moved away because his mother, whom he said was afraid of him, had begun visiting regularly. To back up her claim, Sheila provided a recording in which she asked Kenneth if his mother had attacked him, and he quietly replied yes. The police found Sheila's story suspicious, and the next day, a police officer who visited Sheila obtained a search warrant for the estate. This was not the first time Sheila had attracted the attention of the police. She had been implicated in the mysterious disappearance of another boyfriend in the past. However, despite her past, Sheila had never been questioned or had her property searched until now. When the police arrived, they could not find Sheila at home, but they did notice several suspicious fires burning near the outbuildings. These fires were very unusual and involved a variety of materials such as mattresses, pieces of wooden furniture, hay, and other items soaked in flammable substances. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that one of the fires contained human remains in the form of bones. Police immediately requested additional assistance from forensic experts to document their findings, but what they discovered next was even more shocking. Police found numerous blood stains that had not been cleaned up throughout the house, indicating a violent crime had occurred. The large amount of blood suggested that a horrific massacre may have occurred. The blood found at the scene belonged to at least 3 different people. The body found in the fire was identified as that of the missing Kenneth County. 2 empty fuel cans were discovered nearby, matching the cans Kenneth had purchased at a local store the day before his disappearance. Further investigation uncovered the body of Michael DeLog, who had been missing for several years. Police also found several fingers belonging to an unidentified third person. In addition, a large number of items, believed to have belonged to several men due to their varying sizes, were recovered from the farm's storage pit, but their owners remain unknown. Sheila was not present at the time of the police visit, as she had already discovered them and planned to flee. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston to evade arrest. Along the way, she hitched a ride with a driver and eventually formed a relationship with him, leading him to invite her to stay with him. However, the next day, after watching a TV news report about a manhunt for a dangerous criminal, the driver called the police and reported that Sheila was currently in his bed. A disturbing discovery was made during the search of Sheila's home, a collection of videotapes. The recordings depicted men, including Kenneth, Michael, and several others, confessing to serious crimes. However, the men's visible distress and condition suggested that these confessions had been coerced through torture. After Sheila was arrested, concerns about her mental health prompted the court to order an evaluation. The results showed that Sheila suffered from delusional disorder and symptoms of schizophrenia. She believed that she was an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. Her attorney used her poor mental health to create a defense, portraying her as terminally ill and unaware of her actions. This claim was based on severe mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. Sheila claimed that, years earlier, she had had a near-death experience after being in an accident and falling into a coma. During this time, she said, she encountered God and was tasked with ridding the world of men who harmed children. Sheila's ex-husbands and several of her lovers also took the stand in court, all of whom described her as insane, unstable, and extremely violent. In particular, her third husband, Wayne Anise, claimed that Sheila had repeatedly urged him to kill Wilfred Bill Labar, apparently motivated by his desire to take his estate. However, the defense team's efforts to portray Sheila as insane and in need of psychiatric care were unsuccessful. Instead, it was determined that she was fully aware of her actions when she committed the crime. Sheila was ultimately convicted in July 2008 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Any appeals she filed were subsequently denied. Sheila is currently serving her sentence at the Homestead Correctional Facility in Florida. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a girl named Marie was born into an ordinary Filipino family. Concerned about her future, Marie's mother decided to send her to the United States, hoping her daughter would have a better chance at success. Marie was eventually adopted by an American military family who already had a daughter named Esther. The two girls, close in age, quickly became friends, unaware of their true relationship. Marie lived in a foster home, not knowing that her American father was her biological father. Meanwhile, Esther, the friend with whom Marie shared her games, secrets, and dreams, was actually her biological sister. Neither of them realized their blood relationship. As the two girls grew up, they decided to leave their parents' home to start a new life together in Florida. They rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club, which quickly became their favorite SPO. Marie Carlson had an optimistic outlook on life. She loved the color pink and often used the word beautiful as a guiding principle. In Marie's beautiful world, a new meaning suddenly appeared. It was love. Marie entered a new chapter in her life when she met Jeff. They quickly fell in love, started dating, and eventually got married. Their love was symbolized by the birth of a beautiful daughter, named Paris, reflecting the love and beauty they shared. However, Jeff remained a mysterious man, with a past and family members that Marie knew nothing about. While Marie's personal life was going smoothly, she set a lofty career goal of working for the FBI. To prepare for this challenging job, she began studying criminal law. However, her path to pursuing her dream was fraught with difficulties. Every step forward in her career required great effort. In the end, despite her best efforts, Marie left the police force without accomplishing her original goal. Marie's life, which had been why before, gradually became difficult due to a mental disorder. The root cause was severe sexual abuse she had suffered since childhood, leaving deep psychological trauma. Over time, the mental disorder became more severe, making Marie's daily life a painful ordeal. The trauma of the past had a serious impact on Marie. It not only made her lose her self-esteem but also weakened her feelings for her husband, Jeff. Their once passionate love had cooled down and was filled with disappointment. Unable to overcome the difficulties in their marriage, they decided to divorce, feeling exhausted by the pain they had gone through. The divorce, the failure of her police career, and unsuccessful attempts to find a new job took a toll on Marie. She realized that she could no longer be a good mother to her daughter. To protect Paris from the negative environment, Marie and Jeff, who cared deeply for their daughter, agreed that Jeff would have custody of her. Despite their difficult past, the divorced couple completed their divorce smoothly. Despite the lengthy legal process, both of them tried their best for their little daughter, Paris. The divorce did not cause a rift between Jeff and Marie. They remained friends, and Jeff was always there to support Marie when needed. Marie also tried to see her daughter as often as possible and never missed her birthday. Marie was searching for meaning in life. Despite the hardships she went through, she did not give up. One day, she realized that she needed faith. Marie began attending the Emerald Coast Church founded by James Flanders. From the very first words of his simple and sincere sermon, she felt welcomed and loved. Marie began her new journey in Redemption, a town in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. James and James's colleague, Tanya Flanders, were two kind people who spread warmth to everyone around them with their kindness. They built a church called the Shrine of Mercy, where people could seek help and support. One day, they helped Marie, who was having a hard time in life. For Marie, the church was not only a place of prayer but also became her real home. This place was filled with love, and people were always willing to help each other. Marie found a new family, surrounded by warm affection. She felt free like a bird that had just escaped from a cage. As the days passed, Marie gradually regained her joy in life. Her heart was filled with happiness, and a smile was always on her lips. Marie's eyes shone with new hope, reflecting not only the gentle Florida sunshine. Her health and weight improved, and her soul was filled with happiness. The church was not only a place of worship but also a caring community. Here, Marie found a second family full of love, light, and faith. On the outside, the church looked simple and humble, blending in with other urban structures. Inside, the space was cozy with simple pews. Here, time seemed to stand still, and people were united by their common faith. But, one day, Marie was pregnant. A secret she kept hidden under her loose-fitting dress. She felt ashamed and afraid, sharing it only with a few of her closest friends. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. The news quickly spread throughout the small town. The truth about the child's father turned out to be heartbreaking. It was a man Marie had dated for a short time. He had abused her physically and mentally. When he learned that Marie was pregnant, he left without saying goodbye. After experiencing the deep trauma of abandonment, Marie found comfort and new hope in the church. There, she always received strong support. The Flanders family became loyal protectors, surrounding Marie and her young daughter Grace with care and love. They became the real family Marie had always dreamed of. She realized that she was no longer alone. After 3 months since Marie had given birth to her daughter. This should have been a time filled with joy and happiness, but Marie made a shocking decision. She posted a surprise announcement on social media. She was leaving. Not just leaving, Marie decided to cut all ties, leaving behind the city, family, and friends. Marie kept her plans a secret, not wanting anyone to doubt or interfere. She only casually mentioned her dream and expressed her feelings to her family, as if saying goodbye forever. No one knew where she was going or what she was doing. She suddenly disappeared without a trace, leaving her family extremely worried and desperate. They did not know what to do to find her. Marie's mysterious disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was worried when his ex-wife went missing. He decided to call the police to look for her. As each day passed, the fear of Marie's fate increased. While everyone was still talking about Marie's disappearance from Fort Walton Beach, a terrifying truth was revealed. She had left without taking her 3-month-old daughter. Marie's sister Esther immediately became suspicious. "It's not like her at all," she said, her voice shaking. She was always protective of her child. Everyone who knew Marie was shocked. She was a model mother, always tenderly caring for 7-year-old Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was also surprised to learn that she had stopped caring to Paris. The police could not ignore the incident. When they examined Marie's recent messages, they discovered something unusual. Her writing style was very different from her previous ones. This made them suspect that Marie might have been coerced or that someone was impersonating her. An investigation was launched. Suspicions arose about the ex-boyfriend of her, due to Marie's relationship with this man seemed to be bad. Marie's disappearance remains a mystery. Even Marie's sister Esther has been unable to confirm or deny theories about the case. Police are investigating many complex aspects, including Marie's disappearance, strange text messages, and questions about ex-boyfriend of her. In INT reviews with the police, Tanya and James Flanders provided additional information. They said Marie had gone missing before, often leaving for periods of time and returning without explanation. The family also revealed that Marie suffered from bipolar disorder, which may have caused her sudden mood swings. A few weeks before her disappearance, Marie had fallen into a state of depression. She had started taking medication but had to stop because she was pregnant. Feeling unwell, Marie asked the Flanders to look after her daughter. After lunch, Marie went to rest, while Tanya and Grace went shopping. James came to look after Marie, but when he came, Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders immediately began searching. They searched the streets and checked the parking lots of every building. James suddenly had the idea to check the airport. To his surprise, they found Marie's car there. James drove home with the spare key. The investigators immediately checked the car, but FOUND no traces or suspicious evidence. In search of new information, they decided to go to the airport where Marie had left. Their plan was to review the security camera footage in the parking lot. The airport was responsible for storing this information. If they were lucky, they might find Marie's plane ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. Although they found Marie's ticket, it was of no help to the investigation because there were no important traces on it. Marie's search efforts at the airport did not yield the expected results. A search of her car also turned up no clues, and the parking ticket had no fingerprints. Additionally, the security cameras in the parking lot were not working on the day Marie went missing, making the situation even more difficult. The police are focusing on the mysterious man who is the ex-boyfriend of Marie. Investigators returned to the church in the hope of finding clues about the father's identity and role in this complicated case. The church is abuzz with speculation about where Marie sought solace in the past. Parishioners have revealed Marie's dealing with her grief. She was struggling with depression and considering abortion. However, the Flanders were against the decision. They asked Marie to keep the baby and promised to help her. The Flanders' eldest child was grown, but they were desperate for another child. Even though they were in their 40s, they were still eager for the chance to become parents again. Once again, a parishioner declared Grace a gift from heaven and was a reward for the Flanders' kindness in helping Marie. Then, Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, appeared. Although he was not the baby's father, he held an important clue. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie was pregnant. When asked about the baby's father, Marie lied and said she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. So who really was Grace's father? As the investigation deepened, investigators interviewed Tanya's close friends, who were also members of the church, to learn more about the case. Initially, these friends promised Marie to keep the information confidential, but eventually, all the women were forced to reveal the truth. They all confirmed that James was Grace's biological father. It turned out to be a natural pregnancy, and James' wife, Tanya, had to accept the situation silently. This attracted the attention of investigators, leading to the Flanders family being called in for further questioning. Only Tanya appeared and confirmed the information, revealing that she had been in the room when the incident occurred. She described it as having happened with the consent of all parties involved. Tanya emphasized that the important thing in this situation was the relationship between people and higher goals, not the physical aspect. After Marie's disappearance, more terrifying information about the relationship between her, James, and Tanya gradually emerged. In fact, James not only had an affair but also had a parallel relationship with both women, similar to a form of polygamy. Once, they even celebrated the child's birthday together and took a photo, in which James, Tanya, and Marie posed as a happy family. This photo was intended to prove that the ceremony was only to honor Tanya, not related to Marie. However, after investigation and interviews with Tanya's friends, new information came to light that clarified the situation. Although Tanya said Marie was satisfied with her current relationship, the reality changed after Grace was born. Marie's maternal feelings rose strongly, making it impossible for her to easily give up her daughter. According to Marie's friends, she began to be jealous of Tanya. They suspected that Marie did not want to give Grace to Tanya and intended to win James back. These accusations immediately made Tanya the prime suspect. If Marie disappeared, all of Tanya's problems would be solved. She would have the chance to raise Grace alone and continue to be James' beloved wife. It has been 2 months since Marie went missing, but no more clues have been found. Investigators have used many methods, including GPS, to find her. However, in 2011, GPS technology was not yet fully developed, so they had to rely heavily on call and text data from mobile phones. The only thing they know for sure is that Marie was at the airport with James, but not Tanya. Later, Jason, a young priest, came to the police station. He had spoken on behalf of James many times, and one day he decided to speak directly to the investigators. Jason recounted a conversation he had overheard. Shortly after Marie's disappearance, James expressed his sadness and concern. He said that he would have to leave the country because of Marie's disappearance but could not reveal the details. James only mentioned that something terrible had happened during the time when Marie was severely depressed. During that period, James stayed with Marie at the clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily replaced him. Rumors of Pastor James' illicit relationship spread among the parishioners, and Jason was shocked to learn about James' polygamy. Jason directly asked him about his relationship with Marie. James frankly admitted that he had had sex with both Marie and his wife. James said that he and Marie had argued and fought shortly before she went missing, but he insisted that Marie was still alive when she disappeared. After this conversation, James decided to resign from his pastoral duties and quickly left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Recently, Marie's family contacted the Flanders family to retrieve some of her belongings. As a result, investigators seized Marie's phone, which may have contained important information. Although most of the data had been deleted, some of it was recovered. They also found a video of James advertising precious metals on the phone, which aroused the investigators' suspicions. In 2011, committing a crime was easier than it is today. Surveillance cameras were not common, and digital traces could quickly disappear. DNA detection technology was just beginning to develop, making it easier for criminals to get away with their crimes. However, thanks to the development of digital forensics, this case may be solved. 3 years after Marie's disappearance, new software was developed that could recover data from phones and computers. Thanks to this, it was possible to recover messages between Marie and James. These messages showed a completely different side of James. The couple exchanged sensitive pictures, even taken in church. In a final email to James, Marie expressed her desire to leave Fort Walton Beach and not leave her child in what she called a cursed place. The secrets that the Flanders family had kept for so long were exposed. In desperation, James and his lawyer decided to take their last chance. They proposed a deal. If James revealed the location of the victim's body, he would only be charged with manslaughter, which carries a lighter sentence. Marie's family, after years of pain and suffering, agreed to the deal. They just wanted to know the truth and find peace of mind. James shares details about his relationship with Marie and the hardships they went through. Marie suffered from depression, which caused many arguments between them. During one argument, Marie pushed James, and when he tried to calm her down, she accidentally fell to the ground and lost consciousness. This was a fateful moment in their lives. James realized the seriousness of the situation when Marie's heart stopped beating. Although he tried to save her, Marie eventually passed away. This incident left James with deep remorse and regret. After years of fruitless searching, investigators finally found Marie's body in James Flanders' yard. The body was wrapped in a blanket and buried 5 feet underground, only discovered when James showed them the exact location. The discovery shocked everyone involved in the case. James Flanders was sentenced to 15 years in prison for manslaughter, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, was apparently unaware of her husband's crimes and was in complete shock at Marie's death. This was confirmed by a witness, who was later revealed to be the Flanders family's lawyer. Had Marie's body been discovered earlier, experts could have determined the cause of death, which could have affected the investigation. After 5 years, Marie was finally laid to rest at her funeral. It is possible that her sister Esther sang a farewell song for her. However, the fate of little Grace remains a mystery. Currently, Grace lives with her foster mother, Tanya Flanders, in Arizona. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Cawley. Her parents divorced, and her mother remarried Bruce Jaman. Kendra had 3 sisters, Jamie Kalman, Ashley Lipham, and Melissa Jameson, and 1 brother, Neil Hatcher. She grew up in Pleasant Plains and pursued her studies in dentistry there. Following her divorce in 2010, she relocated to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone Dental Studio. Kendra, who had a strong Christian faith, aimed to use her dental skills to help others. The clinic, for instance, offered free services to disadvantaged children. In her free time, Kendra taught Bible studies and took part in volunteer programs, which involved building churches abroad and offering free dental care to children in Ecuador. Her career quickly took off, and her poor solo life thrived. On May 24, 2015, Kendra started dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua. They met through a dating app, and from their first date, they became inseparable. Both shared similar values and interests and wanted the same things in life. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having been in a relationship for just a few months, he and his girlfriend were already talking about getting married. Unfortunately, a tragic incident in a parking lot claimed her life, ending all their future plans. Investigators who arrived at the massacre site assessed the crime scene and initially suggested a robbery, as Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. Beside her body, they discovered bullet fragments and a gun magazine. However, evidence from the shooting shifted the focus away from robbery. Kendra was shot twice. 1 bullet hit her back and another struck her head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, excident G through the chin, suggesting that Kendra had her hands raised behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was confirmed after the police obtaining CCTV footage, which helped reconstruct the events. The footage shows a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. Half an hour later, Kendra arrives home and parks in the same garage. A few minutes later, a man comes up to her, shoots her, and runs to the side, then jumps into the moving black Jeep. The videos were of poor quality and the crime scene couldn't be seen in them. The attackers couldn't be identified, but the vehicle was put on the wanted list. It was decided to release the images of the Jeep and the driver captured by the cameras to the media. The authorities asked the public for help, and that turned out to be effective. A man named Jose Luis Ortiz got in touch with the police. He reported that the car in the images was his, but made it clear that he wasn't involved in the shooting and wasn't drive. The vehicle. When questioned, Jose explained that on the morning of September 2nd, two of his friends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, asked him to fix their car and requested to borrow his Jeep until the evening. Jose agreed. He mentioned that later that evening, Brenda called Jose to a restaurant. That same evening, Crystal drove the Jeep come back to Jose's house. Therefore, the man was quite surprised when he saw his Jeep in the news. When Jose saw his Jeep on a TV show, he asked Brenda about it. At first, she said it was a different Jeep on the screen. Then, Brenda mentioned that Crystal had been traveling for work, and she didn't know anything about it. Brenda advised Jose not to tell anyone and just repaint the Jeep. Brenda agreed to pay for the Jeep to be painted. Meanwhile, Jose was waiting for a decision on his U.S. citizenship and wanted to avoid any issues with the police. He understood that Brenda had tricked him, so he went back to the police department to testify. He police monitored all the Jeep's movements that day and identified the two young women whom Jose had mentioned. Brenda Delgado was the first person investigators questioned. She claimed she didn't know Kendra and had never seen her before. When asked about her whereabouts on September 2nd at 7:42 p.m., Brenda provided an alibi, stating that she was at a restaurant with Jose and even presented receipts for the dinner. This raised questions about why someone would keep dinner receipts for so long. Eventually, with detailed investigation, the concealed truth behind the crime was uncovered. The central figure in the investigation was Brenda. She was born into a modest family, Luis and Maria Alato, who immigrated to Dallas from Mexico. Her father worked in a factory. They settled in a low-income neighborhood in southeast Dallas, where Luis found a job in construction, and Maria worked at the U.S. Post Office and cleaned houses. Brenda was their second child and only daughter. She was an excellent student, well-liked by her teachers, and worked part-time at a flower shop and as a waitress. Brenda was very ambitious and dreamed of attending medical school, but unfortunately, her parents couldn't afford the high tuition fees. After graduating from Skyline High School in 2000, she continued to live with her parents while dreaming of a prosperous and beautiful life. To achieve her goals, Brenda worked diligently. She was employed as a dental assistant and also worked at a department in North Park Center. In 2012, Brenda met Ricardo Paniagua and fell in love with him. Their first date, a dream come true for her, was at a Jennifer Lopez concert. In November 2012, just 3 months after meeting, Brenda moved in with Ricardo at his home in Fitzhugh Urban Flats. Ricardo was equally captivated by Brenda and even made an effort to meet her parents. In 2013, she posted on Facebook for his birthday. Brenda later found out she was pregnant, but at Ricardo's urging, she ended the pregnancy, which left her heartbroken. A bit recovered from the decision, Brenda decided to focus on her career and her beloved Ricardo. In the fall of that year, she started attending Sanford. Initially, it appeared that Brenda had moved past the emotional impact of the breakup, but this wasn't true. Her reliance on Ricardo intensified. When Ricardo shared a photo online with his new partner Kendra, who resembled a model, Brenda might feel jealous. Investigators, after gathering details about Brenda and her life, concluded that she had a motive to remove her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda was his ex-girlfriend. They had an on and off relationship from 2012 to 2015, the relationship ending a few months before Ricardo met Kendra. Ricardo believed that he and Brenda remained friends and didn't see any issues between Brenda and Kendra. After all, he had dated other women before meeting Kendra, so why would meeting her affect Brenda? Brenda believed she had come up with the perfect plan to win back her ex-boyfriend and eliminate Kendra from his life. She started by offering him support and showed interest in his relationship with Kendra. In reality, she was aware of all their future plans, and Ricardo mistakenly thought her interest was genuine. Unfortunately, men often misunderstand women and sometimes trust them blindly. Brenda had been plotting her own plan for months. She had opened Ricardo's mail and knew all his plans with Kendra, even when and where they had booked tickets. All of this was infuriating to Brenda. She wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher, sincerely believing that she had taken Kendra's place. Brenda transferred Ricardo's account to her phone to monitor him closely. Following Ricardo and Kendra became her main focus in life. She became obsessed with stalking them, eventually quitting her job to dedicate all her time to this pursuit. Over time, Brenda developed a sinister plan to kill Kendra, whom she despised. To carry out this plan, Brenda approached several acquaintances, offering them money to harm Kendra. A mutual acquaintance introduced her to Crystal Cortez, a 21-year-old single mother facing severe financial difficulties. For just $500, Crystal agreed to help her. Following Brenda's instructions, Crystal contacted Christopher Love, who agreed to carry out the crime. Crystal gave Christopher $500 from Brenda along with 2 types of illegal substances. Kendra was being followed by 2 women who wanted to learn her habits and daily schedule to choose the best time and place for their crime. On September 2, 2015, they used Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher waited for Kendra in the parking lot. They didn't follow her home from work because they were worried about getting stuck in traffic. That evening, they successfully carried out their plan. A few days after the crime, Crystal and Christopher were arrested. The suspects denied their guilt and being at the crime scene. However, things changed when Christopher was found with the gun that killed Kendra in the side compartment of the car. Crystal, on the other hand, was nervous and constantly confused in her testimony, giving different testimony about why the SUV appeared in various parts of the city. In the initial questioning, Crystal confessed to being the driver in the parking lot. However, she insisted that she was forced there by an armed carjacker who had entered her SUV and made her drive. Trying to appear innocent, she falsely stated that her son was with her in the car. This claim was later disproved as security cameras did not show any child present. During the interrogation, as more evidence emerged, Crystal altered her testimony and sought to negotiate with the investigators. She agreed to testify against Brenda in exchange for a reduced sentence. Crystal informed the police that Brenda wanted Kendra dead and that the crime was Brenda's idea. Crystal stated that within 2 weeks of meeting Brenda, they started planning the crime. The CE found out that Brenda wasn't just sad because her relationship with Ricardo had ended, she was obsessed and desperate to win him back. She pretended to be happy about being his loyal friend, but her life started falling apart. She began to resent Kendra, believing she had taken her place. According to Crystal, it was at this moment that Brenda decided she wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. That's when a plan to commit the perfect crime hatched in Brenda Delgado's mind. During her testimony, Crystal explained how Brenda came up with the perfect crime and enlisted her help. Together, Brenda and Crystal started planning to kill Kendra. They met several times and came up with various plans. The initial idea was to inject Kendra with illegal drugs or sedatives and then dispose of her. Brenda knew she needed a trustworthy accomplice to avoid suspicion, so she began the search. They drove through the rundown neighborhoods and asked several people for assistance. This is how they met Christopher. He agreed to help and played a significant role in planning the details of the crime. The three of them decided together that the quickest way to kill her was to shoot her. During their collaboration, Crystal disclosed that September 2nd was intentionally selected. Brenda was aware that Kendra and Ricardo were planning a trip to Mexico, so they decided to eliminate her before the vacation. Brenda told Crystal she wanted the crime to appear as a failed robbery. Next, the criminals then selected the location for the murder. For days, they meticulously followed Kendra's movements, recording her every minute to ensure nothing altered for the chosen day. After her work hours, they tracked her path home and planned how to subtly access the apartment complex's secure parking garage. On September 1, 2015, they conducted a final check. On the morning of the crime, Brenda and Crystal picked up the Jeep from Jose and then picked up Christopher. Brenda was dropped off at the library in Caro. Wilton to create an alibi, while Crystal and Christopher headed to Kendra's apartment complex. They waited across the street for about 30 minutes before driving to Kendra's workplace. After failing to follow her due to traffic, they went back to the house to wait. When Kendra arrived home, Christopher, wearing gloves, got out of the car, approached her with a gun, and shot her as she exited her vehicle. Crystal mentioned that she didn't witness the shooting but heard it. After that, she drove Christopher home, picked up her son from his grandmother, and later met Brenda at Jose's house to give him the Jeep. As a result, Brenda's dream was fulfilled. She was free from her despised rival and only needed to wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda felt delighted that she had executed the perfect crime. Crystal's honest confession and testimony against Brenda clearly proved Brenda's guilt, leading to a swift issuance of an arrest warrant. However, when police went to arrest her, Brenda was not at home. As a dual citizen, she escaped to Mexico. Following her escape, her role in arranging a contract killing was revealed, and she was added to the wanted list. On April 6, 2016, the FBI added Brenda to their list of most wanted fugitives, offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to her capture. She was the only woman on the list at that time and the 9th woman ever to be included. Just 2 days later, Mexican authorities arrested her in Torreon, Coahuila. She was extradited to the United States on October 6, under the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Once in the U.S., she was charged with capital murder in Texas, and her trial began in 2017. During the court hearing, the families of Kendra and Ricardo openly shared their feelings. Witnesses verified Brenda's harmful obsession with her ex-lover and her intentions. In court, Brenda's cousin Moses Martinez discussed his sister's depression following her breakup with Ricardo. He also disclosed that Brenda had offered him money to attack Kendra with a baseball bat, a proposal he declined. At the trial, Jennifer Escobar, Brenda's friend, testified that Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo. She recounted that Brenda would read all his emails and track his movements through his phone. Jennifer informed the jury that Brenda had a copy of his house key and access to his bank accounts. She also revealed that Brenda asked for her help to get rid of the hated Kendra, suggesting methods like injecting something lethal or using a bat to put her in a coma. Brenda offered Jennifer $2,000, a car, and illegal drugs in exchange for her help. Jennifer talked about this offer with her parents and decided to refuse it. It's odd that, when presented with the suggestion to harm or kill someone, but no one reported this threat to the police. Brenda's obsession was highlighted through evidence presented by several associates in court. It was found that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead, seeing H. or as a barrier to reuniting with Ricardo. Evidence revealed that Brenda's obsession grew significantly in the months before Kendra's death. During the hearing, an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500 was presented, which Brenda gave to Crystal as payment for her involvement. Christopher received a cash payment of $600. Cell phone records showed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime. Moreover, there were over 99 calls recorded between Brenda and Crystal from August 22 to September 4, demonstrating their constant communication to plan the murder of Kendra. The defendant's attorney attempted to place most of the blame on the actual perpetrators, but this strategy was unsuccessful. The defense claimed that Brenda was not present at the crime scene, offering an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant when the crime occurred. Although Brenda did not plead guilty, the jury disagreed with her defense. Brenda was found guilty of murdering Kendra, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after just 30 minutes of deliberation. Christopher, who directly committed the murder, admitted his guilt and was sentenced to death. Crystal cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, which resulted in her receiving a 35-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole. Kendra Hatcher's family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom after the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family never believed Brenda could be involved, as they knew her as a loving daughter and a woman with solid family values and Christian principles. In conclusion, the tragic case of Kendra Hatcher underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and obsession. Brenda Delgado's relentless pursuit to reclaim her past love led to a senseless crime that ended a life full of promise. The investigation revealed the intricate and disturbing lengths to which Brenda went to orchestrate Kendra's murder, revealing a dark side that was hidden beneath a facade of normalcy. The verdict delivered justice for Kendra and her family, but it also serves as a stark reminder of the profound impact that personal vendettas can have when they spiral out of control.